So I want to explain some terminology here for you guys, just so we're all on the same page. So I've talked about RDA. This stands for Resource Description and Access, and this is a cataloging standard. It gives rules for what goes into a cataloging record, where you find that information, so things like you need to include the title, and it comes off the title page. This is the cataloging standard of today, du jour, I guess. It is what the vast majority of libraries in the United States are now using. So it is what the consortium has decided is going to be the standard for all of our libraries also. You will find records in other cataloging standards. Most often they'll be cataloged using AACR2, which stands for Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, 2nd edition. This was replaced by RDA, gosh, it would have been just about 5 years ago. So it's still in use. You'll still see AACR2 records, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that as long as they're good records. But keep in mind that we are trying to upgrade things in this consortium so that the records all sort of have the same capabilities and match. So MARC stands for Machine Readable Cataloging. This is the encoding standard we use. We're going to dig into it a little bit. And then Authority, a system of vocabulary control. So basically what this does is you pick one term or name that is the name that somebody or something is known by, and then you create a record for that, and that record makes it so that that name can be linked anywhere that it's used in your bibliographic records. So it's a fancy way of making things link, and also making it so your patrons can look for, say, synonyms for your subject heading or different spellings of an author's name, and still find everything linked to that, the name that you've chosen. So something like the subject heading for UFOs is unidentified flying objects, but in the authority record for that subject heading, UFOs is present. There are other terms like that too that are present in there. There's a whole bunch of synonyms, and this means that your patrons can go into the catalog and search UFOs and find everything with the unidentified flying objects subject heading using their own vocabulary. So authority's magic. It's not complete magic because not everybody remembers to put in all the synonyms or different spellings that may be present. So you may not have complete access to these things, but it does make life a lot easier. So that's why we want to make sure those things are linking, because that makes it so you can find those synonyms, misspellings, everything can come together in one place. Any questions so far? All right, let's talk about MARC. So what MARC does to make our records computer readable is it assigns numbered tags, and they're 3 numbers long, to different fields for the computer to read. So basically you have a set of 3 numbers, and that tells the computer this is a specific type of information. So if you see a 245, you now know that the computer knows, rather, that this is where you're going to find the title and the statement of responsibility for the resource. Otherwise, it wouldn't know. So you and I would look at that and say, oh, that must be the title. I mean, logic. Computers aren't smart, so you have to encode it so they understand. Each of these fields contains a specific piece of information, and the fields can be further divided into subfields so that individual pieces of information that are part of a larger group of information can be pulled out. So in that 245 field, you have title, statement of responsibility. Well, the title can be in a different subfield should be in a different subfield from the statement of responsibility, and that makes it so that you can do searches for author name and title separate from one another and actually find these resources. So it basically breaks things down for the computer and explains what certain pieces of information are and what the computer can do with them. Wanted to dive into AACR2 and RDA just a teensy bit. We are not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I want you guys to understand the difference between these two and get to where you can recognize especially a good RDA record. So with AACR2, this was a cataloging standard that was designed when we were all using card catalogs. So, I mean, what was the most important thing that you needed when you were putting cards in a catalog? You needed space. You really wanted to stick as much information as you could on one card, not 2, not 10, one card that you could file, and then everything was going to be okay. So AACR2 was trying to make that work by doing things like using a lot of abbreviations, which would save you a lot of space. I mean, think about it. ILL instead of illustrations. That saves a lot of space on a little card. Since RDA was designed specifically for an online environment, we don't care about saving space as much. So there are fewer abbreviations. I'm not going to say there are no abbreviations, because you will find abbreviations. Initially, RDA was saying, oh, no abbreviations, none whatsoever. And then I think people started getting up in arms about, really? I have to write out, seconds, hours, minutes, seconds. And so then they started adding abbreviations back in. So now there are some abbreviations, but you'll find fewer of them. And you won't find the weird Latin abbreviations like SN, SL, et al. None of that is there. So if there are abbreviations, they're in English at this point. So they're a little more familiar. In AACR2, sometimes your record included a GMD, or a General Material Designator. So this is in your title field, and you guys have seen this because Cardinal still uses these. It's in the 245 field, you've got title, and then in square brackets after the title of the resource, you've got something that says like electronic resource or video recording. That was an AACR2 thing. RDA said, well, that language is not precise and it's not going to work for computers to search stuff. So RDA got rid of the GMD and replaced it with 3 new pieces of information in the 336, 337, and 338 mark fields, which we'll look at a little bit. But in Cardinal, you still have some GMDs. So be aware that those should still be present for certain types of resources. And what's often going to happen is, like with your video recordings or your ebooks, you'll get those records in and you won't see that GMD in square brackets there in the title. You're going to have to send that to a bibliographic catalog to put back in. Because what's happened is that since RDA decided no more of these a few years ago, OCLC, who runs the big shared catalog that all of us take stuff from in one form or another, even if we don't know it, they went in and ran a bot through all of their millions of records and stripped out every single GMD in there. So if you're downloading, if you're looking for stuff that's already in the catalog, it'll probably be there, but it might not. Somebody else may have downloaded it and just left it the way it is. So that's one thing you want to look for. And then your bibliographic catalogers, you're going to be downloading stuff from beyond the shared catalog to put in the shared catalog. Now you'll find some things. But we'll talk about you tomorrow. So watch out for that GMD and those 3x fields. And then in AACR2, one of the things that you did, again for space saving, was any kind of publication or distribution information or copyright dates, it was all considered to be pretty much synonymous and interchangeable. So it was all put into a 260 field in MARC. So that meant that you could do things like you'd have like New York, Scholastic, and then C 2017, saying, you know, the copyright is 2017, but we're just going to put it here because, you know, whatever. Same difference. In RDA, there's an acknowledgement, again, for computers, that you want to have those different kinds of dates and creators of various types of stuff in different places. So there are now 264 fields, and you put all of those different types of information in different places. So you'll often see like publication information in one 264 field and a copyright date in a different one. And that's the way it goes at this point. There's debate about that, but they're so busy trying to upgrade RDA at this point. I don't know if that'll be part of it or if they've just sort of put that on the back burner and maybe we'll get to it in 2020 something. So if, like me, you like to see actual examples of things, here is one. So this is a record for the same resource, Face to Face with Frogs, in AACR2 and in RDA, so you can see the differences. So the AACR2 is on the left, RDA is on the right, and the added RDA elements are in red and bold, so they jump out at you. So what you can see is that a lot of stuff stays the same. Some of the stuff with the 008 is different, but we're not really going to worry about that today. The main things you want to look for if you're trying to decide if something's RDA or AACR2, look in that 040 field. In RDA, you will have a delimiter E RDA. And you should have that delimiter B, E, and G. Now what you're going to find is there are going to be records that follow every single rule of RDA, but for some reason don't have that one little thing in the 040 field. If that's the case, check with your bibliographic cataloger what they want to do. Do they want you to send it on to them so they can add that one little thing to enhance searching possibly down the road, or do they want you to leave them alone and just send it out to the stacks because everything else matches up? So double check on that one, and there may be something at the consortium level that you guys will decide upon that becomes a rule for this, but at least for now. And some of this may get fixed when Cardinal runs its own bots through your catalog, but we'll just see what happens. Another thing that may or may not be different is you can see in the 100 field here, the name is the same, so Moffat, Mark W. But in the RDA record, we've added what's called a relationship designator that tells you what this person did. For a book, not necessarily that important. I usually go ahead and add it. I basically always go ahead and add it because it's habit now. But it's not completely necessary. Where this becomes really handy is think about those DVDs where you've got like about 500 names listed. Who's going to know what these people did? Especially if you've got somebody who's playing multiple roles. This can be really handy for helping your patrons figure out who these people are, that they're finding a movie that this person acted in and directed. That may get them real excited. I don't know. So this can be really handy for that. And in the future, library systems aren't doing this yet, but I think they will someday. I have high hopes. In the future, this may be a way to sort through searches and zero in on certain things. So maybe you want a book that's written and illustrated by the same person. You could use those relationship designators to determine that that person is both writer, author, and illustrator. And now you could find that without having to just sort through all the ones on the shelf or in the catalog to see who's listed as the illustrator. So it has potential. It's certainly worth including. So if it's there, leave it. If it's not, if that's the only difference, I wouldn't worry too much about it. But again, check with your bibliographic cataloger. They may be like, no, I need to do that. It's like an insult to me if they're not there. As catalogers, you know, sometimes things have to happen even if they're not the most efficient because it looks really nice. And later on it could be even more efficient. So a little further down you can see the difference in the publication information. So there's the 260 field, Washington DC, National Geographic, and you can see in this one we have that C 2008. So you're just using a copyright date saying, yeah, that's probably the publication date too. In RDA, we split that into two separate 264 fields. The first one with that second indicator of 1 is for publication information. The second one with the second indicator of 4 is for copyright date. One thing to check for, make sure that copyright date is in a C subfield. That's something that you should probably check for. Just hop into Mark if that's something you're at all comfortable with and double check that one, because not all cataloging systems make that easy to do, and so not everybody remembers. I have a dream of a day when you put in that second indicator of 4, it magically puts you into a C subfield. It doesn't seem that hard, and yet none of the library systems have done it. They really need to hire me as a consultant to just yell at them about the things that they should be doing. This would make life so much easier. And you'll notice that 2008 in the first publication field is in square brackets. That's not going to be unusual. In this case, it just means that we're saying that this is pretty much it's almost definitely the publication date, but the book doesn't say it's the publication date. So we're taking it from that copyright date, we're implying it, so magical square brackets. That's more for the other catalogers than anything else, but be kind to the other catalogers, because if you're at all unclear about things, it makes somebody else's day a little less easy. The 300 field, you can see another example of a difference between AACR2 and RDA. So in AACR2 you have P, call, ill. In RDA you have pages, color illustrations, color map. And we spell color like Americans spell color, so don't worry about the U, unless you really want to put it in there. I mean, I guess as a consortium you may want to decide on that, but you get to choose how you're going to spell color. Are you British? Are you American? You decide. And then here's the extra stuff that we add for RDA, these 33X fields. So the 336 is for content type. This is the type of content that you're going to find in the resource. This is the information you're going to find. So in this case, we have text and we have still images. So this means that we have a book that has words and a lot of illustrations. You aren't going to need to see still image there most of the time. I'd look for it if you are putting in like graphic novels or children's books with lots of pictures. I'd look and make sure that that's there. That could be pretty handy. Evergreen's not doing much of anything with these right now, if anything at all, but it's there, so it should be useful for when they do. For adult books, if there's a whole bunch of illustrations in there, still image can be appropriate, but it's mostly useful for the ones that are mostly illustrations. So if you as a copy cataloger are going through these records and you have a graphic novel in front of you, most likely there's all sorts of other stuff wrong with the record at that point, but you see that there's not a content type of still image. This is probably fairly significant, and that's something that you should probably send to a bibliographic cataloger. If everything else is okay, you might just make a note. You may have like a list, like, you create a box for things, and a bucket, that's what it's called. A bucket for things, and maybe you make notes about, this one just needs the relation, or the relationship designators looked at, or this one just needs an additional content type for still image. And that way you can go ahead and send the book up to be checked in and out and utilized, and at the same time it can be improved upon when your bibliographic cataloger or catalogers have time. Yes?
What about if it's like a cookbook, for example? Would that be considered illustrations? It doesn't have a lot of pictures.
Yeah, if you have a cookbook, I would usually add still image in there for the content type. That could be important. And that's something, again, like on the local level, you could probably check with your bibliographic catalogers and say, is this something you want me to send on to you just to add this particular language? Because you guys can't, so you have to make sure that you're not sending them too much, but at the same time you want a really good catalog. And once you change it, then nobody else has to, so you've been good citizens. So this next one here, the 337, this is the media type. And yes, that says unmediated. This basically tells you if you need any kind of special device to access the information on the resource. So for a book, you don't. You just need you. If it's a textbook, you need your eyes. If it's a Braille book, you need your fingers. But you don't need some sort of special device. However, if you have a DVD, to watch the movie, you need a device. You can sit there and stare at the pretty sparkly DVD all day long, but you're not going to get to see the movie until you put it into some sort of video player. So that media type tells you what that is. And then the carrier type, this tells you the type of thing that holds the information. So for a book, it's a volume. For that DVD, it's a video disc. So that just tells you what kind of resource you're actually dealing with. So it's pretty precise language. Again, it's something that Evergreen isn't working that well with yet, or working at all with yet. A lot of library systems aren't working with this language yet, but there's a huge amount of potential here, so it should be there. We're planning for the future here with much hope that our ILS vendors come along for the ride. Any questions with this?
I have another one.
Yes, of course.
Since this one already has color map
Uh-huh.
in it, I know there's a distinction for cartographic images that come along. You can add, do we add that, could we add that at the same time?
You certainly could, yes. Yes, so you could have a 336 for cartographic image, or whatever it is. That sounds right. And that could be in there too. But it might not be. And still image might take care of that. So it would just depend on what you feel is important.
And one more.
Yes, of course.
I was told when I went through courses to tell me what was different between RDA and ACO2, that centimeters was not an abbreviation, so we didn't need didn't need the period. However, I do see it in this case at the end of a field.
Yes.
Do we or do we not use it?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So honestly, for all of you, if you see a CM with a period at the end of it, or you see a CM without a period at the end of it, it doesn't matter. There's fancy reasons as to why you would or would not have this period at the end of CM, but honestly, they're tied with printing cards for your card catalog, which nobody does anymore. Or if you do, you have to do it locally because OCLC doesn't, and Library of Congress don't print cards anymore. They stopped. So it doesn't matter if the period is there or not. So if it's something that you are fascinated by and you want to learn the exact rules for when a period should be there or not, come talk to me during a break and I'll let you know. But otherwise, it doesn't matter. So pick a way and just do it that way and move on. Isn't that nice? So as item catalogers, who cares? Don't even look for a period at the end of CM. Look at more important stuff and move on. Yes.
And the 245, the H,
Mhm.
is for large print, would be updated.
Yes.
In the square brackets. And in the 330s, there's a, I think it's 340, that says large print. So when I see one that doesn't have it, I put it in. Shouldn't you put that in?
That's perfectly fine, and I'm actually going to show you some other places to look for large print. But yeah, if you have a large print book and it doesn't show that it's large print, that needs to go to a bibliographic cataloger. And then they're going to need to put that in. And we're actually going to look at examples of where to find that stuff. So yeah, that's important information.
Because
Yeah, your patrons want that.
we have a lot